Hi everyone and welcome back to the Chemist Couple Podcast with Jess and Lee, and welcome to our first ever episode that is a bite-sized version of a previous released episode. So this week we're going to be discussing caffeine and its effects on cardiovascular health. For those of you who are new here, we are both clinical pharmacists and we work in GP practices in the UK. So let's get into the episode.
The first point is, what is caffeine? So caffeine is a stimulant and is the most common psychoactive drug that we consume in the world. And it mainly works on adenosine receptors by blocking the action of adenosine, which normally brings in a lot of tiredness, and this leads to increased heart rate and blood pressure.
So the main sources of caffeine that we know are coffee being the main one, then tea. It's also in things like dark chocolate. And then I think historically it actually was in things like Coca-Cola. I'm not sure whether it still is. It may be in small amounts, and that's because the cola nut was a source of caffeine. And then more recently, we obviously get them in things like pre-workout and then also in energy drinks such as Red Bull, Monster or Ghost.
Now, the third point is, what is considered a safe dose? Now, 400 milligrams daily has been advocated by the FDA, who are the Food and Drug Administration in the United States of America. And a lethal toxic dose has been advised of about 10 to 14 grams.
Yes.
Yeah. And also anything above 1 to 1.2 grams a day, you normally do see a lot of adverse effects.
Yeah. So one of the adverse effects in relation to cardiovascular health is its effect on blood pressure. So we know from studies that consumption of caffeine can increase somebody's blood pressure. So the studies that I've seen was that it increased it between 3 to 5 millimeters of mercury, which is only a very slight increase, however, still an increase. So what I would say on that point would be that if anybody has an underlying heart condition or an underlying condition such as hypertension, to just be mindful of that, because any increase in blood pressure is not ideal, especially in people with hypertension. And I think a bit of advice of what I would give is that if you consume caffeine for the taste of maybe coffee or tea, you can get decaffeinated versions nowadays. They're readily available, easy to come by, and they often taste as good as the real thing.
Yeah. Now, the next point is the increase in heart rate. And like we said, adenosine is actually used as a treatment for those who actually have high heart rates. So by having caffeine in there and opposing that action, it will increase it naturally. Now, this is okay within the doses that we've said and in healthy individuals. But bear in mind, if you have a cardiovascular history of any disease, or you are performing any activity which might raise your heart rate or have anxiety in general, then it's probably not advisable to have large doses of caffeine. It also can increase the risk of arrhythmias, probably due to the increased heart rate and the fact that it can lead to an increase in the QT prolongation. Again, the effects are negligible, but it's always you need to sort of contextualize it and individualize it to yourself. So it's always something to be wary of.
And then the next thing that caffeine affects is also sleep. So as we just mentioned before, it's an adenosine receptor antagonist, and so it basically induces wakefulness. Caffeine has a half-life of about 4 to 6 hours, which basically means that after 4 to 6 hours, there's still half of the dose of caffeine within your body. And then after 12 hours, there will be a quarter of the dose. So say, for instance, if you were having coffee at 9 o'clock in the morning, at 9 o'clock at night, you'd still have a quarter of the dose in your body. If you were someone who experiences the side effects of caffeine, which I am one of those people, then it can have a huge effect on sleep. We know that obviously sleep is involved in a lot of different systems within the body, especially the cardiovascular system, and a good night's sleep actually sort of helps to repair the body, especially the cardiovascular system. And yes, it helps remove adenosine. And then also caffeine is also associated with a decrease in REM sleep, which is actually the restful sleep that you need for that restoration of your body.
Okay, and the last point is caffeine versus coffee. So a lot of the studies that you look into will actually quote coffee being the caffeine source. Now, we know coffee is a plant and it has a lot of fiber, a lot of polyphenols, other chemicals that are beneficial to the gut microbiome and other processes within the body. So are the effects of caffeine really attributed to the drug itself or coffee as a being in its own right? In terms of what we're going to do going forward, we are going to be having less than 400 milligrams a day of caffeine. We are going to be limiting it to 12 p.m. in a day to help improve sleep. And we don't have it for the effects that a lot of people do use it for. We have it purely because of the taste. So decaf coffee, which has the same taste and basically a lot of the properties of normal caffeinated coffee, I think you should just go for that option, if I'm being honest. And as always, this episode is not just for informational purposes only and should not be used in substitute to seeing a healthcare professional. And thanks for listening.